Okay, so it's February 11th, 2025, and things are really heating up in Washington.
Yeah, no kidding.
Feels like every day there's some new drama unfolding between the Democrats and the Trump administration.
Well, and it's interesting because you'd think with Republicans in control of, well, everything, the White House, Congress, and the Supreme Court, that the Democrats would be kind of laying low,
Right.
but they're actually doing the opposite.
Yeah, it seems like they're feeling more pressure than ever to push back against Trump's agenda.
Exactly.
I mean, one quote that really jumped out at me is from Senator Brian Schatz. He said, "We may be out of power, but we are not powerless." And that, to me, that sounds like a pretty clear signal that they're not going down without a fight.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest battlegrounds we're going to see this play out on is the upcoming government funding deadline.
Oh, right, March 14th.
Yeah, that's right. And that has all the makings of a major showdown.
Oh, for sure. Especially when you consider how differently Republicans and Democrats are viewing the year so far.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, yeah, our sources are showing this huge gap. You've got 89% of Republicans thinking 2025 is going to be better than 2024.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have 78% of Democrats who think it's going to be worse.
Wow, that's a pretty stark contrast.
Yeah. And that kind of fundamental difference in outlook,
Yeah.
I think it just makes it that much harder to find any kind of common ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the big question is, will Democrats be willing to play hardball here?
Yeah.
You know, are they willing to risk a government shutdown to try and force Trump's hand?
I mean, it's definitely a risky strategy. I
Yeah.
mean, a shutdown would impact everyone, right? It could really easily backfire on them politically.
For sure.
But some Democrats might feel like they have no other choice if they want to take a strong stand against Trump's policies.
Like a game of chicken almost.
It really is.
And then you got this whole other element, the Vought factor.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, his confirmation as OMB director just adds this whole other layer of complexity.
Right. And for our listeners who need a little refresher, Russell Vought is a really key figure in something called Project 2025.
Okay.
And this is a big one. It's a massive 920-page plan that was actually put together by the Heritage Foundation, and it basically lays out this roadmap for a very different America, one that's, really shaped by this deeply conservative agenda.
And Democrats are clearly worried about it. I mean, you just have to look at how fiercely they opposed Vaught's nomination.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they even held that 30-hour debate in the Senate trying to block him.
Yeah, it's not often you see that level of resistance.
No, not at all. And Senator Chris Murphy actually said something during that debate that I think really captures that sense of urgency that a lot of Democrats are feeling.
What did he say?
He said, this is really important, that we raise the alarm as to what is happening.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're seeing these warning signs and they're desperately trying to get everyone's attention.
Yeah, I get that.
So let's talk about what Project 2025 actually entails. I mean, what are some of the things that people should be paying attention to here?
Well, I mean, it's a really comprehensive plan.
Okay.
It touches on pretty much everything from deregulation and shrinking the federal government to, making big changes to social programs and environmental policies. But one of the most controversial parts, I think, is this proposal to remove job protections for federal workers,
Oh, wow.
which could really drastically change the makeup of the entire federal workforce.
So they're not just talking about, tweaking a few things here and there.
No.
This is like a fundamental shift in how the government operates.
Yeah, exactly. And with Vought now in charge of the budget, Democrats are really concerned that he's going to use his position to try and put these changes into action.
Which brings us to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Oh,
I mean, he is walking a tightrope right now,
he is.
trying to balance these calls for bipartisanship with, the demands from his own party to take a much more aggressive stance against Trump.
Yeah, that's a tough spot to be in.
It is.
So he's facing pressure from both sides, right? I mean,
Yeah.
some Democrats want him to use the budget as leverage to try and force concessions from Trump,
Right.
while others are saying, no, we need to cooperate to avoid a government shutdown.
Right.
It's a tough balancing act, for sure.
It really is.
Yeah, it's like classic political strategy, right?
Right.
Does he play it safe and keep the government running smoothly? Or does he use this as an opportunity to really push back against these policies that he and other Democrats, so strongly disagree with?
And it's not just about tactics, is it?
No.
It's about messaging, too.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if Schumer looks too willing to cooperate with Trump, he risks alienating that more progressive wing of his party.
For sure.
The ones who see this administration as just fundamentally opposed to their values.
Right, and that internal divide within the Democratic Party just makes Schumer's job that much harder. He's got to find a way to unify his party while also navigating this incredibly divided political landscape.
Yeah, it's a tough task for sure. So let's go back to Project 2025 for a second.
Okay.
You mentioned that it was a pretty comprehensive plan. What are some of the things in there that have people particularly worried?
Well, I think aside from those potential changes to the federal workforce that we talked about,
Right.
there's a lot of concern about its impact on social safety net programs. So things like Medicare and Social Security.
Yeah.
Project 2025 actually proposes some pretty significant cuts to those programs, arguing that they're just not sustainable in their current form.
And that's a huge point of contention, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Democrats see those programs as essential.
Yeah.
And then you have some conservatives who view them as, bloated and in need of reform.
Right. It's a fundamental disagreement about the role of government
Yeah,
in providing for its citizens.
exactly. And what about environmental regulations? Does Project 2025 address those at all?
It does, yeah. It actually calls for a pretty significant reduction in environmental regulations,
Okay.
arguing that there's stifling economic growth.
So we're talking about some pretty hot button issues here.
Oh, yeah.
And it sounds like Democrats see this as, a direct threat to a lot of the progress that they've fought for over the years.
That's right. They see it as rolling back decades of work on things like worker rights, environmental protection, and social justice.
And that's why Vaught's confirmation is so significant.
It is.
Because he's not just some budget wonk.
No.
This is someone who helped shape this vision.
Right.
And now he's in a position to actually put it into action.
Exactly.
It feels very high stakes.
It does.
It's like we're at a crossroads, and the decisions that are made in the coming weeks and months are going to have, a ripple effect for years to come.
It's definitely a pivotal moment, and it's not just happening in Washington either.
That's right.
These political battles are playing out in communities all across the country as people grapple with the implications of these very different visions for America's future.
Yeah, and that's why I think this is all so important for our listeners. Because these aren't just, abstract political debates.
No.
These are about real people's lives, their livelihoods, their access to healthcare, their ability to breathe clean air.
Right. It's about the things that affect everyone.
Exactly. And it's easy to get overwhelmed by the constant news cycle and
Yeah.
the, back and forth of partisan politics.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's so crucial to stay informed,
It is.
to understand what's at stake, and to engage in thoughtful discussions about these issues.
Because ultimately, a functioning democracy relies on an informed and engaged citizenry.
Right.
We can't just be passive observers.
Yeah.
We have to be active participants in shaping the future that we want.
Absolutely. One of the things that I find really interesting is the role of public opinion in all of this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've seen throughout history that when people mobilize and they make their voices heard, it can have a real impact on the decisions that are made by those in power.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that 30-hour Senate debate over Vaught's nomination.
Exactly.
That was a direct result of public pressure.
Right, of people calling their senators and demanding that they take a stand.
Exactly. And those efforts can't stop now.
They can't.
We need to keep the pressure on to hold our elected officials accountable and to make sure that they know that we're paying attention.
That we're watching.
Exactly. So it's not just about staying informed.
Yeah.
It's about taking action.
Yes.
Whether that's, contacting your representatives, getting involved in the local politics, or even just having those difficult conversations with friends and family who might have different viewpoints.
It all makes a difference, and it's important to remember that change doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
These are long-term battles, and it requires persistence and patience and a willingness to just keep pushing for the kind of future that we believe in.
It's so easy to get discouraged sometimes,
It-
especially when the political landscape feels so divided.
Yeah.
But we can't afford to become complacent.
No, we can't.
We have to keep fighting for those values that we hold dear and for a more just and equitable society for everyone.
And that's why I think it's so important to seek out different perspectives.
Yeah.
To really try to understand where other people are coming from and to try and find common ground where we can...
Because even in a political climate as heated as this one, there's always room for dialogue,
Always.
for understanding, and for finding solutions that work for everyone. It's easy to get kind of caught up in the day-to-day headlines and kind of lose sight of the bigger picture.
Right.
But when you step back and look at something like Project 2025, I mean, it really highlights these different paths that we could be taking as a nation.
Yeah. And what I keep coming back to is how these political choices we're talking about, they aren't just abstract concepts. They have very real consequences for people's lives. You know? I mean, think about the potential impact of these policies on things like education, healthcare, environmental protection. These are things that touch every single American.
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet here.
Right.
This is about the kind of future we're building.
Exactly.
You know, for ourselves and for generations to come.
And that's why it's so important to engage in this process.
Yes.
To make your voice heard and to hold your elected officials accountable for the decisions they're making.
You know, it can feel overwhelming at times.
It can.
But we really can't afford to tune out.
We can't.
Whether it's through voting or activism or even just, you know, having those tough conversations about these issues with friends and family.
Yeah.
I mean, we each have a role to play in shaping the future of our democracy.
Absolutely. And you know what gives me hope is that we are seeing this resurgence of civic engagement.
We are.
You know, people are paying attention, they're getting involved, and they're demanding more from their leaders.
That 30-hour Senate debate over Vaught's nomination is a perfect example of that.
It is.
It shows that when people mobilize and they make their voices heard, it can have a real impact.
It can, and those efforts need to continue.
Yeah.
You know, we need to keep the pressure on, we need to stay informed, and we need to never stop pushing for the kind of world that we want to live in.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the current political landscape, we want to leave you with this. Don't underestimate the power of your own voice and your own actions.
The future isn't predetermined.
Right.
It's something we create together through our choices, our engagement, and our unwavering commitment to the values that we hold dear.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more analysis and insights into the issues that matter most.